The rain wasn't the only thing pounding against the cabin walls that night. Death was at the door. Silas Thorne, the Alpha King of the Blood Moon Pack, had torn through 3 states, hunting for the kidnapper who stole his twin heirs. He didn't want justice, he wanted a massacre. When his enforcers kicked down the door of that isolated shack, they expected to find a monster. They expected a fight. Instead, the most ruthless killer in the werewolf world froze in his tracks. There, amidst the thunder, sat a shivering, rogue Omega woman. And curled against her chest, peaceful and safe, were the very children he came to kill for. But the silence in that room was more dangerous than the violence, because the Alpha King just realized he made a mistake that could cost him his throne. The isolation of the Smoky Mountains was usually Kate Vance's best friend. As a rogue, a wolf without a pack, anonymity was the only currency that mattered. But tonight, the isolation felt like a cage. Thunder rattled the single-pane windows of her dilapidated cabin, located miles off the main road, near the treacherous ridge of Devil's Drop. Kate sat in a rocking chair that had seen better days, her knuckles white as she gripped the wooden arms. But she wasn't rocking for herself. Curled into the hollow of her neck, wrapped in a faded quilt she had bought at a thrift store in Gatlinburg, were 2 small, trembling bodies. They weren't fully human, and they weren't fully wolves. They were shifting, phasing in and out due to trauma and cold. One moment, a patch of soft, charcoal fur would ripple across the boy's arm. The next, the girl would whimper with a human cry that tore at Kate's heart. She had found them 3 days ago, abandoned in a woven basket by the overflowing creek, half drowned and smelling of sickness. "Shh, Leo. Shh, Luna," Kate whispered, naming them because they had no tags, no scent of a mother, and only the faint, metallic tang of high-born blood. "I've got you. The fever is breaking." She didn't know who they belonged to. She only knew that if she hadn't fished them out of the rising water, they would be dead. Outside, the wind changed. Kate stiffened. It wasn't just the storm anymore. The air pressure in the cabin dropped, heavy with a scent that triggered every survival instinct she had suppressed for years. Pine needles, ozone, and blood. So much blood. It was the scent of an alpha command. She heard the snap of a twig, louder than the thunder. Then, the growl. It started low, a vibration that shook the floorboards beneath her feet, surrounding the cabin. They found us. She didn't know who they were, but she knew what it looked like. A rogue woman with 2 high-born pups in a stolen cabin. There would be no trial. The front door didn't open. It exploded. Splinters of oak flew across the room, like shrapnel. Kate curled her body forward, shielding the twins with her own back as the wind and rain swept into the warm room. 3 figures stepped through the debris. They were massive, hulking shapes in the shadows, their eyes glowing with predatory luminescence. "Clear the room," a voice barked. It was Kyle, the beta. Kate knew the voice type, brutal, efficient. 2 enforcers lunged toward her, but a 3rd figure stepped into the light of the flickering fireplace. The room seemed to shrink. The man was towering, his wet black trench coat clinging to broad shoulders. Rainwater dripped from his dark hair onto a face carved from granite and rage. Silas Thorne, the Alpha King. The rumor of him was enough to make grown men weep, and here he was, standing in her living room. "Where are they?" Silas's voice was a low rumble, barely human. His claws were fully extended, dripping with the rain. "Where are the bodies, witch?" He assumed they were dead. He assumed she had killed them. Kate couldn't speak. The alpha aura coming off him was crushing her lungs. She was an Omega. Biology dictated she submit, expose her neck, and beg. but the twins whimpered against her chest, sensing the threat. The little girl, the one Kate called Luna, clutched Kate's t-shirt tight. "Don't move," Kate told herself. "If you move, he strikes." Silas took a step forward, his eyes scanning the room, looking for blood, looking for violence. He raised his hand, ready to issue the order to tear her apart. Then the fire popped. A log settled, and the flames flared up, casting a glow onto the chair. Silas froze. His hand hung in the air. He saw the quilt. He saw the tiny rhythmic rise and fall of two small chests. He saw the Omega woman, terrified, with tears streaming down her face, yet refusing to uncurl her arms. The boy, Leo, stirred. He let out a small, sleepy yawn, turning his head to nuzzle deeper into Kate's neck. He smelled like milk and lavender soap. Kate's soap. The silence that descended on the cabin was heavier than the storm. Kyle, the beta, stepped forward, a serrated knife in his hand. "Alpha, let me end her. She stole the heirs. She—" "Stand down," Silas said. The command was quiet, but it hit the enforcers like a physical blow. They dropped to their knees instantly. Silas didn't look at them. He only looked at Kate. He took another step, slow, predatory, closing the distance until he was towering over the rocking chair. He smelled the air. He smelled the sickness fading from his children. He smelled the broth bubbling on the stove. And he smelled her. Fear, yes, but beneath it, a fierce, protective, honey-sweet scent. "They are sleeping," Silas said, the realization sounding foreign on his tongue. Kate finally found her voice. It cracked, dry and brittle. They had a fever. The river was cold. Please, don't wake them yet. She wasn't begging for her life. She was begging for the Pups' sleep. Silas stared at her, his golden eyes narrowing. For 7 days he had hunted the scent of the traitor who took his children from the nursery at Blackwood Estate. He had been told they were taken by a rogue syndicate for ransom. He had expected to find corpses. Instead, he found a peasant woman acting like a queen, guarding treasure that wasn't hers. "Give them to me," Silas ordered. Kate hesitated. It was a death sentence to hesitate, but her arms tightened instinctively. "They know my scent now. If you take them, they'll cry. The girl, her lungs are weak." Kyle snarled from the doorway. "She defies you, King! Kill her!" Silas's gaze snapped to his beta. "I said, stand down." He looked back at Kate. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly. He touched the cheek of his son. The boy didn't flinch. He leaned into his father's touch, then sighed and grabbed a handful of Kate's hair. Silas looked at Kate. For the first time, he really saw her. The dark circles under her eyes, the thin frame, the cheap clothes. She hadn't slept in days. She had given everything she had to keep his children alive. "You will come with us," Silas stated. It wasn't a question. "I haven't done anything," Kate whispered. "That," Silas said, his voice darkening as he leaned in close enough for her to feel his breath on her ear, "is for me to decide. But if you drop them, or if they cry because of your incompetence, I will mount your head on the gates of Blackwood." The ride back to the Blackwood estate was a blur of motion and terror. Kate was shoved into the back of a black armored SUV, sandwiched between two silent enforcers. Silas sat in the front passenger seat, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. Kate still held the twins. Silas had forbidden anyone else from touching them. He claimed they were too fragile to be moved to a car seat, but Kate suspected he just didn't trust his own men. Not anymore. As the convoy wound its way up the private roads of the estate, the sun began to rise, illuminating the sheer scale of the Alpha King's territory. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress. Stone walls, iron gates, and patrols of wolves in human form lining the perimeter. When the car stopped, the doors were ripped open. "Take her to the holding cells," Kyle barked, reaching for Kate's arm. "No." Silas's voice cut through the morning air. He stepped out of the vehicle, buttoning his coat. "The dungeons are damp. The girl has weak lungs." "Alpha," Kyle argued, his jaw tight. "She is a suspect. She is a rogue. Protocol dictates that I keep my heirs alive," Silas snapped. He walked around the car and stood before Kate. "Bring her to the nursery. Lock the door from the outside. Put 2 guards on it. If she tries to leave, break her legs. But do not separate her from the pups." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. Break her legs. He was a monster, even if he was a father. She was marched through the grand halls of the estate. Servants lowered their heads, terrified to look at the Alpha, but stealing glances at the strange woman in muddy jeans carrying the royal heirs. The nursery was larger than Kate's entire cabin. It was filled with toys that had never been played with and cribs that cost more than a car. "Put them down," Silas commanded, as he closed the heavy oak door, locking them in. He remained inside with her. Kate moved to the cribs. She gently lowered Leo, then Luna. As soon as Luna's back hit the mattress, the little girl's eyes flew open. She let out a high-pitched, terrified wail, her tiny hands grasping at the air. "Mama! Mama!" Luna screamed. Silas flinched. The word was a knife. His wife, the queen, had died in childbirth. These children had never known a mother. Kate instinctively reached back into the crib. "I'm here. I'm here." She hummed a low, vibrating note, a trick she learned from her own grandmother. She rubbed the space between the pup's ears. Luna's screams subsided into whimpers, her eyes locking onto Kate's face. She grabbed Kate's pinky finger and squeezed. Silas watched from the corner of the room, his arms crossed. He felt a burning sensation in his chest. That was his daughter. She should be calling for him. But she looked at this stranger like she was the center of the universe. "Who are you?" Silas asked. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating curiosity. "And don't lie to me. I can hear your heartbeat." Kate kept her hand on the baby. She turned to face him. "My name is Kate Vance. I was part of the Crescent Creek Pack before it was dissolved." "Crescent Creek?" Silas frowned. That pack was wiped out in the territory wars 5 years ago. Survivors were scattered. "I've been running ever since," Kate admitted. "I found them by the river, Alpha, just past the tree line near my cabin. They were in a laundry basket. Whoever put them there, they covered them with leaves to hide them, but they didn't leave any food. They were meant to die of exposure." Silas's face twisted. The official story from his head of security, Kyle, was that the nursery had been broken into by a highly skilled team of mercenaries. "A basket?" Silas repeated softly. "Not a tactical extraction?" "A laundry basket," Kate confirmed. "Blue plastic. It's still in my cabin if you want to check." Silas paced the room. If she was telling the truth, then there were no mercenaries. Someone on the inside had taken the children and dumped them like garbage, hoping the elements would kill them so the king would have no heirs. Someone close to him. He looked at Kate. She was the only witness. She was the only one who wasn't part of his court, the only one he could theoretically trust, because she had no stake in the politics of his kingdom. "You're going to stay here," Silas said. "Am I a prisoner?" "You are a necessity," Silas corrected. "My children have imprinted on you. If I tear you away now, the stress could kill them while they are recovering. You will serve as their wet nurse and caretaker until they are strong enough." "And then?" Kate asked, her voice trembling. "And then," Silas said, walking to the door, We will see if you are useful enough to keep alive." He opened the door to leave, but stopped. He didn't look back. "Vance?" "Yes?" "Thank you." The door slammed shut, the lock clicking heavily. Kate let out a breath she didn't know she was holding and sank to the floor. She was alive. But she was trapped in the center of a viper's nest, and she knew something Silas didn't. When she had found the basket, there was a blanket inside. It was embroidered with a crest, not the king's crest. It was the crest of the Betas family, Cale's family. If she told Silas, Cale would kill her before she finished the sentence. If she said nothing, Cale would kill the babies to finish the job. Kate looked at the sleeping twins. "I won't let them hurt you," she whispered, "even if I have to burn this whole castle down." The nursery at Blackwood Estate was a gilded cage, but for the next 3 days it was Kate's entire world. She fell into a rhythm born of necessity. She bathed the twins, fed them the specialized formula the kitchen staff left outside the door, and paced the floorboards until her feet ached, humming soft melodies to drown out the terrifying sounds of the pack patrolling outside. She had hidden the incriminating evidence, the blue embroidered blanket with Beta Cale's family crest, inside the lining of the decorative armchair in the corner. She had ripped a seam with her fingernail, stuffed the fabric inside, and pushed the chair back against the wall. It was her insurance policy, or perhaps her death warrant. On the 4th night, the storm returned. Lightning flashed against the grand floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the room in strobe light bursts. Kate was dozing in the rocking chair, Leo asleep on her chest, when the lock clicked. It wasn't the heavy rhythmic thud of Silas's boots. It was the silent, sliding step of a hunter. Kate's eyes snapped open. She didn't move, her instincts screaming freeze. Kyle stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his enforcer gear. He was dressed in a crisp grey suit, looking every bit the noble advisor. But the look in his eyes was feral. He closed the door softly behind him, engaging the lock. "The alphaking is occupied, with the council," Kyle said, his voice smooth like oil on water. "He asked me to check on the assets." Kate tightened her grip on Leo. "They are sleeping, Beta. You'll wake them." Kyle walked further into the room, his nose twitching. He was scenting the air. He was looking for something. "You've made yourself quite comfortable, Rogue. Most Omegas would be trembling in a corner." "I have a job to do," Kate said, keeping her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "The king ordered me to keep them calm. Your presence is agitating them." Kyle chuckled, a low, dry sound. He walked to the crib where Luna lay. He reached a hand out, his claws slightly elongated. "Don't touch her," Kate snapped. It wasn't a request. It was a growl. Weak, pathetic compared to his, but a growl nonetheless. Kyle stopped. He turned slowly to face her. "You have spirit. It's a shame. Wasteful." He took a step toward her. "Where is the blanket, Kate?" "The one they were found in. The Alpha mentioned a blue basket. There must have been a blanket." Kate's blood ran cold. He knew. He knew he had left a loose end. "There was no blanket," Kate lied, looking him dead in the eye. "Just the basket. They were shivering against the plastic. That's why they were so sick." Kyle studied her face. He was a master interrogator, second only to Silas. He took another step, invading her personal space. The pressure of his aura was suffocating, a heavy weight designed to force her to her knees. "If you are lying to me, I will peel the skin from your bones while you watch." "I burned the basket," Kate said quickly, improvising, "in my wood stove, before your men kicked my door in. I needed heat. I didn't think about preserving evidence." Kyle stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. Then he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Smart girl. Burning the evidence. Maybe too smart. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small glass vial filled with a clear liquid. The king is sentimental. He thinks he needs a nursemaid. But accidents happen in the nursery all the time. Zids, choking, a clumsy Omega dropping a child. Kate stood up, clutching Leo. She backed away until she hit the window. Silas will kill you. Silas will mourn, Kyle corrected. And in his grief, he will look to his beta for strength. I will help him rebuild. I will help him make new heirs. Heirs with pure bloodlines, not these weaklings born of his late, soft-hearted wife. He uncorked the vial. The smell was acrid, concentrated monkshood, a poison that mimicked heart failure in wolves. One drop on their lips, Kyle whispered, stepping closer. And one drop on yours. A tragic murder-suicide caused by a deranged rogue. Kate looked around frantically. No weapons, no exit, just the chair. Kyle lunged. Kate didn't scream. She threw herself to the side, shielding Leo with her body. Kyle's hand grabbed her shoulder, his claws sinking into her flesh. She cried out, the pain searing, but she didn't let go of the baby. Die quietly, Kyle hissed. Boom! The nursery door didn't just open, it was torn off its hinges. Kyle froze. Kate fell back against the wall, gasping. Silas stood in the doorway. He wasn't the composed king in a trench coat anymore. He was half-shifted, his eyes glowing a violent, molten gold, his canines fully extended over his bottom lip. His shirt was shredded at the shoulders from the force of his muscles expanding. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask for an explanation. The scent of Kate's fear and Cale's aggression was all the evidence he needed. Silas moved faster than the eye could follow. He crossed the room in a blur and slammed Kale into the opposite wall. Plaster cracked and rained down on the expensive carpet. Silas's hand was wrapped around Kyle's throat, lifting the beta 2 feet off the ground. "You are in my nursery," Silas roared, his voice vibrating the glass windows. "With your claws in my son's nurse. Explain before I rip your throat out," Kyle choked, clawing at Silas's arm. Alpha, she attacked me. I found her, trying to hurt the girl." Kyle dropped the vial. It rolled across the carpet, stopping at Kate's feet. Silas looked down. He saw the vial. He saw the blood seeping through Kate's shirt where Kyle's claws had pierced her. He saw Leo crying in her arms and Luna standing up in her crib, screaming. Silas dropped Kyle. The beta crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. "Get out," Silas said. The command was so quiet it was terrifying. "Silas, listen to me," Kyle rasped. "Get out!" The alpha roar hit them like a shockwave. Kyle scrambled up and fled the room, looking back once, with eyes full of promise, a promise of death. Silas stood heaving, his chest rising and falling. He didn't chase Kale. He couldn't leave the twins. He turned slowly to Kate. The golden glow faded from his eyes, leaving them dark and pained. He walked over to her. Kate flinched. "I won't hurt you," Silas said, his voice rough. He reached out, not for the baby, but for her shoulder. He touched the wound. He drew blood. "I'm fine," Kate whispered, her legs giving out. Silas caught her. He took Leo from her arms and placed him gently in the crib, then scooped Kate up as if she weighed nothing. "You're not fine," Silas said, "and you're not staying in this room anymore. It's compromised." "Where are you taking me?" "To the only place in this castle where I control the locks," Silas said, walking out of the nursery and into the hallway. "My bedroom." The king's quarters were less like a bedroom and more like a penthouse suite atop the fortress. It was a space of dark mahogany, leather, and the overpowering scent of Silas, rain, earth, and raw power. For 2 days, Kate and the twins had lived in his sanctuary. The dynamic had shifted. Kate was no longer just the prisoner. She was the witness Silas was protecting. He had moved a second crib into the corner of his massive room. He slept on the chaise lounge near the door, a silent sentinel, while Kate took the massive king-sized bed with the twins. It was intimate. Too intimate. Kate woke on the second morning to the smell of coffee and pancakes. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. The twins were already awake, sitting on the floor on a plush rug, playing with wooden blocks. And there, sitting cross-legged on the floor with them, was the Alpha King. Silas was wearing grey sweatpants and a black t-shirt that strained against his biceps. He was stacking blocks for Luna, who promptly knocked them over and giggled. A rare, genuine smile tugged at the corner of Silas's mouth. It was a domestic scene that felt like a hallucination. "You're awake," Silas said without looking up. "Eat. You need the calories to heal." He pointed to a silver tray on the nightstand. Kate ate slowly, watching him. "You didn't go to the council meeting this morning." "No," Silas said. He placed a block on the tower. "I don't trust them, not since Kyle." "You didn't kill him," Kate said softly. "Why?" Silas's hand paused. "Kale's family controls the northern supply routes. If I execute him without concrete proof of treason, proof more than just a vial of poison he claims was yours, I start a civil war. I need to dismantle his network first." He looked at Kate, his golden eyes piercing. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened in the cabin, Kate. Every detail. If there is anything you are holding back, tell me now. I can't protect you if I'm fighting blind." Kate's heart hammered. The blanket. It was still stuffed in the chair in the nursery. If she told him now, and the blanket was gone, she would look like a liar. Kyle had likely already swept that room. "I told you everything," she lied again, the guilt tasting like ash. He hates that I'm a rogue." Silas stared at her. He knew she was holding something back. He could smell the spike in her anxiety. But he didn't press her. Instead, he stood up. "We have a problem," Silas said, his tone shifting to business. "Tonight is the Blood Moon Gala. It's an unavoidable tradition. All the high-ranking families will be here, including Kale." Kate stiffened. "You want me to stay here, locked in?" "No," Silas said. He walked over to the closet and pulled out a garment bag. "If I hide you, it looks like I'm ashamed. It looks like I'm guilty. If I bring you out, standing by my side with my children, it sends a message. It says I trust you. It says you are under my protection." He tossed the bag onto the bed. "Wear this. Tonight you aren't a rogue. Tonight you are the nanny of the royal house." The ballroom was a sea of velvet, diamonds, and dangerous ambition. The music was loud, but the gossip was louder. When Silas descended the grand staircase, the room went silent. He looked regal, terrifying in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. But the whispers weren't about him. They were about the woman on his arm. Kate wore a gown of deep, midnight blue silk. It was modest, but clung to her curves in a way that made every unmated male in the room turn his head. She held Luna on her hip, while Silas carried Leo. They looked like a family, and the court hated it. Kate kept her head high, though her legs were shaking. She scanned the crowd and found him immediately. Kyle. He was standing near the bar, holding a champagne flute, surrounded by a group of sycophants. His eyes locked onto hers. He raised his glass in a mocking toast. "Stay close to me," Silas murmured into her ear, his hand firm on the small of her back. The heat of his touch branded her skin. "Do not eat or drink anything unless I hand it to you personally." They moved through the crowd. Silas introduced her simply as Kate, offering no explanation for her lack of a surname or pack affiliation. The insult to the high-born ladies was palpable. A woman with sharp features and expensive jewelry stepped forward. It was Lady Lyra, a woman who had been vying for Silas's attention for years. "Silas," she purred, ignoring Kate completely. "It is interesting that you've brought the help to such a formal event. Surely the nursery is a better place for her." "My children require constant care, Lyra," Silas said coldly, "and Kate is the only one they trust." "Is that so?" Lyra smirked. She reached out to touch Leo's cheek. "They look pale. Are you sure this rogue knows what she's doing? Perhaps they need some water." She signaled a waiter, who instantly produced a crystal goblet of water. Lyra held it out to Kate. "Here, for the boy. He looks parched." It was a test, a public social maneuver. If Kate refused, she looked rude and paranoid. If she accepted, she violated Silas's order. Kate looked at the water. Her senses, sharpened by years of living in the wild, picked up a faint scent. It wasn't poison. It was verbena. Not deadly to adults, but it caused violent vomiting in pups. It would humiliate Silas, making his children look sickly and Kate look incompetent. Kate took the goblet. "Thank you, Lady Lyra," Kate said. "You are so thoughtful." Then Kate tripped. She stumbled forward, splashing the entire goblet of water down the front of Lyra's pristine white gown. Gasps filled the room. "Oh no!" Kate cried, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "I am so clumsy. Please forgive me." Lyra shrieked, the cold water soaking her bodice. "You clumsy little rat! Look what you've done!" Silas caught Kate's arm to steady her. He looked at the wet stain on Lyra's dress. He could smell the verbena now that the liquid was in the air. He realized instantly what Kate had done. She had taken the fall to protect his son from getting sick. A low rumble started in Silas's chest, not of anger, but of amusement. "An unfortunate accident," Silas announced to the room, his voice commanding the silence. "Lady Lyra, you should go change. You smell like wet dog." Stifled laughter broke out in the hall. Lyra turned red, spun on her heel, and fled. Silas leaned down, his lips brushing Kate's ear. "That was incredibly reckless," he whispered. "I smelled verbena," Kate whispered back. Silas pulled back to look at her. His eyes were intense, swirling with a new emotion, respect, and something hotter. "You defended my pack," Silas said softly. "You defended my blood." He shifted Leo to one arm and used his free hand to lace his fingers through Kate's. It was a breach of protocol so massive it sent a shock wave through the room. The alphaking was holding hands with the help. "Dance with me," Silas commanded. I can't. I'm holding Luna." "She can sleep on your shoulder," Silas said, pulling her onto the dance floor. As the music swelled, Silas pulled her body flush against his. For a moment, the dangerous political games, the traitorous beta, and the threats on their lives faded. There was only the heat of the Alpha King, the weight of the sleeping child, and the terrified realization that Kate wasn't just protecting these children anymore. She was falling for their father. But across the room, Kyle watched them, his phone pressed to his ear. "She's a problem," Kyle whispered into the receiver. "Plan B. Hit the estate tonight. Burn the West Wing. Make it look like a rogue attack. And make sure Kate Vance doesn't make it out." The music had faded, replaced by the heavy silence of the post-gala cleanup. Up in the Alpha's quarters, the air was thick with a different kind of tension. Silas had just placed the sleeping twins into their shared crib. He turned to Kate, who was unzipping the side of her silk dress, her movements slow and exhausted. "You were brave tonight," Silas said, his voice rumbling low in his chest. He took a step toward her. "Braver than most of my warriors." Kate froze, her hand on the zipper. "I did what I had to do. Lady Lyra was going to poison your son." "I know," Silas said. He reached out, his rough fingertips grazing the bare skin of her shoulder. "But you took the fall. You let them laugh at you to save him. That isn't rogue behavior, Kate. That is queen behavior." The word hung in the air. Queen. Kate's breath hitched. She looked up into his golden eyes, seeing the raw hunger there. It wasn't just gratitude. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. She could smell the bourbon and cedar on his breath. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear, but from a sudden, overwhelming desire to close the gap. Boom! The floor beneath them lurched violently. The explosion shattered the moment instantly. The floor-to-ceiling windows blew inward, showering the room with glass. Silas threw his body over Kate and the crib, taking the brunt of the shards. Alarms began to wail throughout the estate. A high-pitched mechanical scream that signaled a perimeter breach. "Stay down!" Silas roared, shaking glass from his hair. He stood up, his eyes already glowing the violent gold of the alpha. He sniffed the air. Smoke, gasoline, wolfsbane. He moved to the door, throwing it open. The hallway was already filling with thick, black smoke. "We're under attack," Silas shouted over the alarms. "It's coming from the west wing, the nursery level." Kate's blood ran cold. The nursery. That was where she had hidden the evidence. The blanket with Kyle's crest. If that room burned, the only proof of Kyle's treason would turn to ash. "Take the twins to the panic room in the basement," Silas commanded, grabbing a tactical knife from his bedside table. "I have to lead the defense. If they breach the upper levels, lock the door and don't open it for anyone but me." "Silas, wait!" Kate grabbed his arm. "It's a distraction. The fire in the west wing." "Go!" Silas pushed her gently but firmly toward the service elevator. "Save my children, Kate." He shifted mid-stride, his clothes tearing as he transformed into a massive, midnight black wolf. He bounded down the hallway, roaring a challenge to the invaders. Kate stood alone in the chaos, the twins wailing in the crib. She grabbed them, wrapping them in the thick duvet from the bed. She ran to the service elevator, her finger hovering over the button for the basement. But she stopped. If she went to the basement, she would be safe. But Kyle would win. He would burn the nursery, destroy the blanket, and claim the rogues did it. He would kill Silas in the confusion and take the throne. Kate looked at the terrified faces of Leo and Luna. "I have to save your father," she whispered. She didn't hit the button for the basement. She hit the button for the west wing. The elevator doors opened into an inferno. The heat hit her like a physical wall. The hallway was ablaze, the expensive tapestries acting as wicks for the flames. Kate coughed, pulling the duvet tighter around the babies to filter the smoke. She kept low, crawling along the floor where the air was clearer. The nursery was at the end of the hall. She could hear fighting, snarls, the tearing of flesh, and the sickening crunch of bone. Kyle's mercenaries were here, ensuring the job was done. She reached the nursery door. It was kicked open, the wood splintered. Inside, the fire hadn't fully taken hold yet, but the curtains were burning. Kate scrambled inside. She dumped the twins into the center of the room, away from the walls, covering them completely with the duvet. "Stay down, stay quiet," she begged. She ran to the armchair in the corner. Her fingers frantically clawed at the fabric lining she had torn days ago. The smoke was stinging her eyes, blinding her. "Please be there, please!" Her fingers brushed against soft wool. She yanked it out, the blue embroidered blanket. It was untouched. "Looking for this?" The voice came from the doorway. Kate spun around, clutching the blanket to her chest. Kyle stood there. He wasn't fighting the intruders. He was directing them. Two large, rogue wolves stood behind him, their muzzles stained with blood. You really are a persistent little rat, Kyle said, stepping into the burning room. The firelight danced in his eyes, making him look demonic. I lit this fire specifically to burn that chair. And yet, here you are. You traitor! Kate screamed, backing up until her legs hit the crib. You stole them! You tried to kill them! And I would have gotten away with it too, Kyle smiled, unbuttoning his cuffs. If the alpha hadn't been so weak as to let a stray like you into his bed. He nodded to the wolves behind him. Kill the pups first. Make her watch. Then throw her into the fire. The two wolves snarled and lunged. Kate didn't have weapons. She didn't have alpha strength. But she had the adrenaline of a mother, and she had a heavy brass lamp on the nightstand. As the first wolf leaped, Kate swung the lamp with every ounce of strength she possessed. It connected with the wolf's snout with a sickening crack. The beast yelped and veered off course, crashing into the burning curtains. But the second wolf was faster. It tackled her, pinning her to the scorching floor. Its jaws snapped inches from her throat. Kate screamed, jamming her forearm into the wolf's neck to hold it back, feeling its saliva drip onto her face. "Do it," Kyle commanded, watching with glee. The wolf opened its jaws to rip out her windpipe. Suddenly, a shadow eclipsed the firelight. A massive black shape tore through the doorway, moving so fast it was a blur. Silas. He didn't just attack the rogue wolf, he obliterated it. His jaws clamped around the wolf's spine, and with a savage shake of his head, he snapped it. He tossed the limp body aside like a rag doll. Silas stood over Kate, shielding her. He was in his wolf form, towering and terrifying. His fur was singed, and he was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but his growl shook the foundation of the house. Kyle's face went pale. He hadn't expected Silas to break through the front lines so quickly. "Alpha!" Kyle stammered, raising his hands. "Thank God you're here. I found her. She set the fire. She was trying to kill the heirs." Silas paused. He looked back at Kate, who was scrambling to her knees, clutching the blue blanket. Then he looked at Kale. Silas shifted. The sound of bones rearranging was gruesome, but seconds later, the Alpha King stood there in his human form, naked, bloodied, and breathing heavily. "She set the fire?" Silas asked, his voice deadly calm. "Yes!" Kyle pointed an accusing finger. "I caught her trying to burn them alive." "Kate," Silas said, not looking away from Kyle. "Why are you here?" Kate stood up, her legs shaking. She walked forward and held out the blue blanket. She shook it open. In the flickering light of the flames, the silver crest embroidered on the corner reflected the fire. It was a wolf, holding a dagger. The crest of House Cole. "I found them in this," Kate gasped, coughing from the smoke. "By the river. This is what they were wrapped in when you kidnapped them, Kale." Silas stared at the blanket. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. His beta, his brother in arms. Silas turned his gaze to Kale. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was execution. "You didn't just betray me," Silas whispered. "You stole my children. You left them to freeze." Kyle's mask crumbled. He snarled, dropping the pretense. "You are weak, Silas. You let your grief for your dead wife make you soft. The pack needs a ruler, not a widower playing house with a rogue. Whoa." Kyle pulled a silver-plated gun from his waistband, a weapon forbidden in werewolf combat, designed to stop healing. He aimed it at Silas's chest. "Goodbye, King." Bang. Kate moved before she thought. She shoved Silas hard to the right. The bullet didn't hit Silas's heart. It grazed his shoulder, spinning him around. But Silas didn't fall. The pain seemed to fuel him. He roared, a sound that wasn't human, and lunged before Kale could fire a second shot. They crashed into the wall, shattering the plaster. It was a brawl of brute strength. Kyle was fast, desperate, fighting for his life. He kneed Silas in the gut and tried to gouge his eyes out. But Silas was the Alpha King for a reason. Silas caught Kyle's wrist, twisting it until the bone snapped and the gun fell to the floor. Kyle screamed. Silas grabbed Kyle by the throat and slammed him through the burning window frame. They teetered on the edge, 3 stories up, the fire raging behind them. "For the good of the pack," Kyle gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "The pack is mine," Silas growled. He threw Kyle. Kyle fell into the darkness, his scream cut short by the wet thud against the cobblestones of the courtyard below. Silas stood at the window for a second, breathing hard. Then he turned back to the room. The fire was spreading fast. The ceiling was groaning. "We have to go," Silas rasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Kate grabbed the twins from the floor. They were crying, terrified, but unharmed. Silas scooped up Kate, babies and all, into his good arm. He didn't run. He charged. They burst through the flames of the hallway, Silas using his own body to shield them from falling debris until they reached the stone staircase of the east wing. They burst out into the cool night air of the garden just as the roof of the nursery collapsed inward with a deafening crash. Kate fell onto the grass, gasping for sweet, clean air. She checked the twins immediately. Leo was coughing, but Luna was just staring up at the stars, wide-eyed. Silas collapsed beside her. He lay on his back, staring at the burning wing of his ancestral home. Blood pooled beneath his shoulder. Kate crawled over to him, panic seizing her chest. "Silas, you're bleeding, the silver!" Silas turned his head to look at her. His face was pale, sweat matting his hair to his forehead. He reached out a hand, his bloody fingers brushing her cheek, leaving a streak of red. You saved me," he rasped. "Why?" "Because," Kate whispered, tears falling onto his chest. "I couldn't let the pups lose their father." Silas smiled, a weak, weary smile. I think I need a doctor." Then the Alpha King's eyes rolled back, and he went still. The infirmary at Blackwood Estate was sterile, white, and smelled of antiseptic and fear. For 6 hours Kate had paced the waiting room floor, her jeans stained with soot and the Alpha King's blood. The twins were asleep in a temporary crib set up in the corner, guarded by 2 enforcers who now looked at Kate not with suspicion, but with a confused reverence. She was the rogue who had walked into fire. She was the woman the king had shielded with his own body. The double doors swung open. Dr. Henson, the pack's elderly physician, stepped out. He pulled off his surgical mask, his expression grim. "The silver bullet shattered against his clavicle," Henson said, his voice grave. "We removed the fragments, but silver acts as a neurotoxin to alphas. It halts their natural healing. He is in a coma. If his wolf doesn't fight the poison, he won't wake up." Kate felt the room spin. "Can I see him?" "He's weak, Kate. He needs pack strength. The elders are already convening to discuss." "Succession." Kate's head snapped up. "Succession? He isn't dead." "He is incapacitated," a cold voice boomed from the hallway. Elder Marcus, a man with greying hair and a stiff demeanor, walked in, followed by 3 other council members. "The pack cannot be vulnerable. With Kyle dead and Silas down, we need leadership. We will take custody of the heirs." Marcus gestured to the enforcers. "Take the children." The guards hesitated. They looked at Marcus, then at Kate. Kate stepped in front of the crib. She was exhausted, bruised, and an Omega by birth. But at that moment, she felt a fire in her chest that rivaled the inferno she had just escaped. "No," Kate said. Her voice didn't tremble. Marcus scoffed. "You are a rogue. You have no standing here. Step aside or be removed." "I am the woman who saved those children when your beta threw them in a river," Kate said, her voice rising. "I am the woman who carried them out of a burning building while you were hiding in your offices. And I am the woman the Alpha King took a bullet for." She took a step toward Marcus, pointing a shaking finger at his chest. "Silas isn't dead. And until he is, I am the guardian he appointed. If you want to touch these children, you'll have to go through me. And trust me, I've already killed one traitor tonight." The room fell dead silent. The enforcers lowered their hands. They had seen her fight. They smelled the scent of the Alpha King all over her, not just his blood, but his claim. "Let her stay," Dr. Henson said quietly. "His wolf responds to her scent. If you separate them, you kill him." Marcus glared, his jaw working, but he nodded stiffly. "You have 24 hours, rogue. If he doesn't wake, the council takes control." Kate sat by Silas's bedside. He looked pale, the wires and tubes a stark contrast to his usual invincible strength. The black veins of silver poisoning radiated from the bandage on his shoulder. She took his hand. It was cold. "You can't leave them, Silas," she whispered, resting her forehead against his knuckles. "Leo needs to learn how to walk. Luna needs someone to chase away the monsters. And her voice broke. I need you to tell me I'm not crazy for loving you." She stayed there for hours, humming the same lullaby she used for the twins. She told him stories about the cabin, about how she found the pups, about how terrified she was when he kicked down her door. Around 3 a.m., the heart monitor beeped faster. Kate lifted her head. Silas's hand twitched in hers. "Silas?" His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, they opened. The golden glow was dim, but it was there. He blinked, focusing on her face. "Kate," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel. "You're loud." Kate laughed, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I thought you were gone." "No," Silas whispered, squeezing her hand weakly. "I heard you. You yelled at Marcus. He was trying to take the twins." "I know," Silas said. He took a deep breath, wincing as his chest expanded. "Help me up." "You can't. The doctor said—" "Help me up." It was an alpha command, but soft meant only for her. Kate slid her arm behind his back and helped him sit up. He was dizzy, sweating, but his eyes were clear. "Open the door," Silas said. Kate opened the door to the hallway. The enforcers, Dr. Henson, and even Elder Marcus were still there, waiting for the deadline. They looked up, shocked to see the Alpha King sitting up, alive, with his hand firmly gripping the rogue's shoulder for support. "Marcus," Silas called out. His voice was weak, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Alpha," Marcus bowed low, his face pale. We were praying for your recovery." "You were planning my funeral," Silas corrected. "But I will forgive it. Once." Silas looked at the gathered crowd, then looked down at Kate. He didn't care about the blood on her clothes or the soot in her hair. He saw the warrior who had saved his legacy. "There will be no question of succession," Silas announced, "because there is no question of my family. The twins are my heirs, and this woman—" He turned Kate to face him. He reached up, his thumb brushing her lower lip. "Kate Vance," Silas said, loud enough for the room to hear, "you are no longer a rogue. You are the savior of House Blackwood. And if you will have me, I would like to make you my Luna." Kate stared at him. "You're delirious. It's the drugs." "I have never been more clear." Silas smiled, the gold in his eyes brightening. "I came for blood, Kate. But I found a home. Stay with me." Kate looked at the twins sleeping in the corner, then back at the man who had torn the world apart to find them. "Okay," she whispered. But no more cliffhangers, and no more fires. Silas pulled her down for a kiss that tasted of life, promise, and a future that belonged to them. Deal. And that is how a storm-drenched night in a mountain cabin changed the fate of the most powerful pack in the world. Silas Thorne went looking for revenge, but he learned that strength isn't just about claws and fangs. It's about who you're willing to bleed for. Kyle's betrayal nearly destroyed them, but it was Kate's courage, an Omega with nothing to lose, that rebuilt the kingdom from the ashes. They say that wolves mate for life, but in the case of Silas and Kate, they didn't just find a mate, they found their match. What do you think? If you were Kate, could you have trusted Silas after he kicked down your door? Or would you have run the moment the coast was clear? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, especially about Kale. Did he get what he deserved? If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, romance, and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next dramatic saga. Until next time.